The Life Coaching Toolbox Podcast is brought to you by Joeel and Natalie Rivera of Transformation Academy. In this episode, Natalie talks about the butterfly, Natalie's story of personal transformation. This episode is one of 6 episodes in a series about coaching your clients to rewrite their life story using the hero's journey.
Now let me tell you a transformation story. My story. The butterfly is a symbol that represents the process of human transformation. You see, a caterpillar goes about its life believing that the only reality that exists is the one that they know. They have no idea of their true potential. They have no idea that one day they will fly. And this is exactly how life unfolds for most people too. They get so wrapped up in their everyday lives that they come to believe that it's all there is. They don't know their true potential, but unlike caterpillars, humans have a higher level of awareness. Humans can see the butterflies and know that they were once a caterpillar. They have dreams of flying, but they don't know how, and so they submit to life on the ground. But the caterpillar feels a calling to turn inward, to cocoon itself, to change somehow. And humans feel this call too. It's an ache in our hearts for forgotten dreams, an impulse to do something different, something radical. A fire within us that no matter how hard we try to stuff it down, it still burns. And when we don't answer this call, often life sends us wake-up calls. Who we truly are at our deepest core will stop at nothing to break free. We start to pay attention. We start to notice how we feel. And we ask ourselves the deeper questions about what it all means, what this life is for, and who we truly are. And as we reach a tipping point of personal awareness and self-determination, we enter a chrysalis and the transformation begins. Because transformation is an inside job. It isn't always pretty or easy, but it always leads us to a life of meaning and authenticity. And here is my transformation story. So when a caterpillar approaches its time of transformation, it begins to eat ravenously, consuming everything in sight. The caterpillar outgrows its own skin many times until it's too bloated to move. It turns its world on its head as it attaches itself upside down to a branch and forms a chrysalis. This gentle encasing limits its freedom and protects it during the duration of the metamorphosis. And I can totally relate to this process. At one point in my life, I began ravenously consuming every inspirational book in sight. I felt heavy and as if I'd outgrown my life, yet I couldn't move. And my world turned upside down. I felt like I was in a prison, but unbeknownst to me, I was preparing for a period of personal transformation. I had been living a stagnant life for a decade, dwelling in my comfort zone of detachment and security. And everything was as I had always known it. Life was relatively easy, simple, drama-free, and I'd been tolerating what was labeled as chronic fatigue syndrome for more than 10 years, so low energy was my norm. And if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said that I was happy. But isolation within your family, self-sheltering, and denial can create that type of confusion. Now, don't get me wrong. I did have some amazing times, and I had a fantastic best friend at the time who kept me sane. And I spent a lot of time with family, but I woke up every morning to my alarm clock and contemplated all the evil things that I would be willing to do if I never had to answer to that damn alarm clock again. And even though I liked my coworkers and I didn't even really mind my job that much, I just loathed the whole working process. I felt like a voluntary slave. And I'd always told myself that this was what I had to do, that everyone else had to work too, after all. I mean, what else am I gonna do, right? And I was also had an empty, almost non-existent marriage, but yet I was totally oblivious to it because I had convinced myself that being unfulfilled and lonely and feeling unloved was pretty normal, and that because I didn't have a lot of conflict, it meant I was doing better than average. And so my unconscious mind had submitted to a life of servitude and mediocrity, but my unconscious mind and my soul knew that I was so much more. And it's as if my true self was conspiring to shift my reality. And I reached a point where I didn't know what would happen if I answered the call to a different life, but I knew that I could no longer live a life that wasn't mine. And so I let go and embraced my impending chrysalis and my fate. But little did I know just how quickly metamorphosis takes place in humans. If we were to open the cocoon halfway through the process, you wouldn't find a caterpillar-butterfly hybrid inside. Instead, there would literally be a blob of goo. And so a common misperception is that the cells of the caterpillar rearrange into the butterfly. However, recent discoveries have unveiled the mind-boggling truth that within this ooze, a new type of cell that some scientists refer to as imaginal cells begins to form, as if from thin air. They're not quite sure how it works. And they're totally different from the caterpillar cells. And so at first, the caterpillar cells actually think that these new cells are an enemy, and so the immune system at first starts to gobble them up. But eventually, the imaginal cells become so numerous that the caterpillar's immune system can't destroy them fast enough. And so the imaginal cells are drawn together and they begin forming clumps. And then they cluster together and they feed off the caterpillar soup that they're developing in. And as if by magic, one day the imaginal cells collectively become conscious of what they're creating, an entirely new organism. And so they begin taking on different roles and creating the intricate workings of a butterfly. Now, during my metamorphosis, my life disintegrated completely. Everything that no longer served me, which was basically everything, began to fall away rapidly. It was sticky and messy, and at times I felt like I was being torn apart. But at the same time, I felt as if evolution had taken me over, and I knew with every fiber of my being that I was on the right path. And within 6 months, there was literally like no trace of anything that had been in my life before. I walked away from my career, which was my business. I sold my house. I ended my marriage. I disconnected from people who drained my life. I sold all of my belongings. And I even found a new home for my dog. I was unrecognizable and identityless. I was neither bloated caterpillar nor emergent butterfly. I was just a blob of primordial ooze, ripe with infinite possibilities. Each new spark of imagination and inspiration ignited a flame of knowing within me, an awareness that I was changing. And that as I embraced who I really was, circumstances that didn't serve me shifted away with greater speed. And I was drawn to live in alignment with my true self, my passions, my talents, and my longings with greater intensity than I'd ever experienced before. Now, when the butterfly has matured, the chrysalis becomes transparent. The need for restriction has been outgrown. The butterfly emerges upside down and holds on to its empty shell with such reverence as if to say thank you to where it came from. Suddenly, things became clear to me. I was ready, and so I emerged back into the world, totally transformed. And for a while, I felt like I dangled uncomfortably, in shock at what had just happened and who I had become. I felt vulnerable, crinkled, and damp after breaking free from my womb of change. I clung to the remnants for a little while I took deep breaths and learned to stretch my wings. I was in awe and appreciation for all that I'd been through. The emptiness, the depression, the numbness, the inspiration, the transmutation, and the re-emerging. I didn't know what to do next, but I trusted that when it was time, the wind would gently nudge me to let go and ride the currents of my new life. I wasn't afraid, because nothing had ever felt so right. I was authentically, totally, and emphatically me for the first time in my life. And I took one last look back at all that I had been, and then I released it completely. And I was blown away at how effortless it was to fly when you allow yourself to be who you truly are. And instantaneously, everything I needed for my new life was drawn to me, one thing after another. A relationship that fulfilled my longing for true love and acted as a catalyst for my expansion entered my life. which is my partner Joeel, as did living environments within which I could get acquainted with my new self. And as I came into alignment with me, I became aware that there was a larger transformation taking place. There were countless other people experiencing similar episodes of metamorphosis, and somehow I knew that we were all part of something much greater. I became aware that I was not alone, and I felt drawn to other people who were willing to take radical personal responsibility and risk the pain and fear of total transformation in order to live life on their terms and fulfill their life's purpose. So if you are hearing these words, you are one of these people. So whether you're a caterpillar looking longingly at the butterflies flying above you, or you're clinging to the remnants of the life that you know is no longer yours, your job is to answer the call, to trust the process, to embrace who you truly are. Doing so gives other people permission to do the same. A revolution of transformation and awakening starts with you.
Visit transformationacademy.com/toolbox to download free life coaching worksheets that go with the activities discussed in this podcast, plus other resources for creating a thriving life coaching business.